So if you ever had any questions about fonts, he's a good person to keep in mind as well for that. Tonight we're going to go fast and hard, but we're going to have, with the help of lots of volunteers, some recording. So hopefully we'll be able to capture this for people to be able to replay. I want to thank everybody for coming, and I hope that you all enjoy the demonstration tonight. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just ask Pariah to take over.
Up there, all my contact info and all that stuff. Just pariahburke.com. Your own websites, you know, pretty easily with various WordPress themes and what's that other, Wix, and you know, all those build yourselves. But you're still kind of locked into these templated systems, unless you want to write HTML and CSS, and then you can build exactly what you want. Anybody in here a web designer? Few of you, okay. So you may want to do that. You may want to build exactly what you want. The rest of us who are not really coders might have a little trouble with that. So I wanted to look at ways to work in InDesign to get your content. Oh, okay, that is 2014. To get your content out there to clients in controllable manners. Unfortunately, not one format works for all systems. Interactive PDFs are great on Windows. As long as people don't open them in preview on a Mac, they're great. And Windows Mobile, which is basically a full version of Windows nowadays anyway, that works great. But on iOS and Android, PDF support's terrible. Ebooks are easy to create. There's built-in readers in the newer versions with Mavericks on Mac and newer. And then iOS and Android have built-in ebook readers because of iBooks and Google Books, Google Play Books respectively. But you don't have readers pre-installed on Windows or Windows Mobile. And you've got these other formats too. But you can do some really interesting stuff. You just have to figure out how you want to disseminate this, where your clients are going to be looking at it. If you want to send your portfolio to iPads, you're looking at, depending on a number of factors, ebook, fixed layout ebook, or a DPS app. PDFs are not going to work for you. But if you want to send them to desktops, DPS apps are completely out. Anybody never opened InDesign?
Just kidding.
Okay.
Oh no.
Anybody not have InDesign? Alright, that's good. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is we'll start with a really simple. We'll start with something really simple. We'll start with an ebook format. So if you go to, in InDesign, if you go to the File menu and then New Document, and for those of you who are new to InDesign, the new menu offers Document, Book, Folio, and Library. Document is what you want to actually create. A book is a collection of documents. It's not creating a book. It's connecting a bunch of separate InDesign documents together. A folio is strictly for creating iPad and Android app publications, and then a library is like a mini version of Adobe Bridge, where you put a whole bunch of little assets that you'll want to drag and drop into other documents. So typically you want new document, and if you choose intent, you're going to tell InDesign what, oh, that is really blurry. Yeah, I'm sorry. No, it's okay. We both tried it. That's as far as it goes. No, I think I just did it. It's weird. It's like when I can't seem to. Yeah, but as soon as I let go, watch. Oh, well, I guess it is a little bit better, right? It didn't stay.
You can still tell us.
Okay, yeah, you
Print
can
web
go down.
pages.
You want to try? See if you can do it?
Mm,
No, not really. I can go grab another.
No, let's do it. Let's do it. But thank you for trying. Okay, so under intent, you have to tell InDesign what type of document you want to create. Are you going to press with it print, which is it going to be CMYK and ready and high resolution for print output? Are you going to the web, which is kind of a generic catch-all for anything that doesn't fit into print or digital publishing? Digital publishing being finger painting. Digits.
Okay.
My jokes don't get better. So print is, high quality CMYK color going to press. Digital publishing is if you are making a tablet app, specifically, something that's in the App Store, not iBooks, kind of thing. And then web is anything that doesn't fit into those two. Typically, when you choose web, it sets the measurement system to pixels, it sets the color space to RGB, and that's it. That's all it does. There's no other limiting to it. So you can use this to create a web banner graphic ad, if Photoshop frightens you.
Well, doesn't it also put the resolution down to?
Oh yes, yeah, thank you. It does. It lowers the resolution to screen resolution. But that's really not too relevant because when you do the export to PDF or EPUB or whatever, you can change it. You can specify 72 pixels per inch or 144, which would give you the double resolution higher res for Retina.
Okay.
But it does limit you to screen resolutions. It figures everything in that term. So in this case, since we're going to do an ebook, which is for screen, I'm going to choose web. You don't want facing pages on. And then the little page size drop down here gives you a bunch of presets. Honestly, these are mostly useless. Few of us even have screens this size anymore because these are all the square aspect resolutions and not the widescreen aspect. And I look around the room, we've all got widescreen laptops. So. But really, with an ebook, it doesn't matter too much. So what I typically do is I set the width to about 600, and then I'll set the height to something like 900, just so I get the feel of working in an ebook, what taller than wide kind of thing. Then you hit OK, and you got a basic document. If you click in the document, right in the main area, well, first you've got these magenta outlines. These are your margins, but you can put stuff outside the margins. It's not set in stone. Not like Microsoft Word. If you click in the middle, you should have a text frame. Everything, for those who are new to InDesign, everything in InDesign is a container content metaphor. Text and pictures and native vector drawings and interactivities and sound and movies and all that stuff, that's content. It has to be held within a container, a box. So your text has to go into a text frame.
That's a default to have a text frame. Like I've changed mine to not default with a text frame. So some people might have opened a publication without a text frame already there.
Right, yeah, good point. So when you're going to create a new document, depending on your intent, print does not use a primary text frame, web does, it turns that on. This is CC. Sometimes it might be a little bit different if you have CS6. The primary text frame is it just creates the text frame for you. If you don't have that text frame there, if you click and there's nothing there, you can just go to the type tool and then click and drag, and now you've created a text frame. And you can begin typing. Then of course you've got the black and white arrows at the top of the source panel. I will tear this off so it's a little easier to see. Okay. When you're creating an ebook, what we call a reflowable ebook or just an ebook for iBooks, Kindle, Nook, Kobo, the late Sony Reader, Adobe Digital Editions Reader, Google Play Books, a million other ebook readers. It's reflowable text. It's all text-based and it's all reflowable, meaning whatever you put in there adapts to fit the size of the screen. This is the greatest strength of ebooks. I can read the same book on my laptop as on my iPad, as on my phone, which I don't use the phone because I read fast and I'm constantly swiping to change pages, but it reworks the text to fit each of those screens. So I don't have to worry about building separate versions like you do for the web, what we call responsive web design. You have to basically build a separate layout for different screen resolutions using CSS code, but and it's not building a full separate layout. It's saying if the screen resolution is less than this, move this object over here or wrap things that way and all that. But with EPUBs, you don't have to worry about any of that. It just automatically reflows. So it's all based on the text. So if I go in here and I just type fill with placeholder text, and then I increase my font size, or sorry, decreased it, increase my font size here, you can see that the text flows around this container, the frame. It flows to fit it. That's my screen. It'll do the same thing if I view it on a smaller device or a larger device and whatnot. But for that to work, everything has to be treated as text, even pictures. So I have set up something here.
So do you just embed the images within the text then when you do that?
Yes.
Okay.
You're familiar with InDesign?
A little bit?
So they'd be inline images,
Yes, okay.
as opposed to just images
and
slapped on
wrap
the
them
page.
around. Yeah,
Right.
Right.
You can also do the same thing with anchored images. So you don't necessarily have to paste them within the text. You just have to anchor them and then.
To position on the page.
Yes. Well, yes and no. The positioning on the page may not survive, but at least the position within the text will be where that anchor is. So you won't wind up with a picture down here in the text that describes it up here.
Yeah, I'm going to use it that way.
So I went ahead and set this up ahead of time. So here's a basic portfolio description of something. Okay, so here I might have the title of my whatever piece I'm showing, and the client's name and the year of creation, a description of the project or my contribution to it, and then, you know, copyright notice. If it's copyright you, it's kind of bad form to put a copyright after every single one, but if your client owns the rights, you really need to. I recently completed a project where my only right is I reserve the right to display the piece in my portfolio and for self-promotion. So I have to legally make the copyright notice every appearance of this project. I have to make it according to the client. So I just went ahead and put those in there, and I set up, you know, paragraph styles so that I can just copy and paste and put in new ones. I'm going to show hidden, oh, there are some, okay. So here's, you know, just the description of my piece. Now I'm going to bring in the graphic. Now typically the way you do that in InDesign is you select the black arrow, and there's a few different ways you can bring them in. I'll show you all of them. But go to File, Place, and I just am working with a bunch of images. This is the set of images I usually teach Photoshop and such with, so they're not my work or anything.
Go back to that.
It's an example of using Photoshop's liquify badly.
Okay.
The girl increased the size of one breast but not the other. Narrowed her waist and screwed up the background so you can tell. I'll just go with something, we use Ducky. Okay. So you bring that in, you get a loaded cursor in InDesign, then you can click and release, and you get the full-size image. Or you can click and drag and get a smaller image. You can also...
I won't stretch it, it'll keep it proportional, like by default.
By default, it'll crop it, yes, but you can distort it if you wanted to. Let's see, where are we? Desktop, practice images. Or you can just drag from Finder, or if you're on Windows from Explorer, drop it into InDesign, and you get the same loaded cursor. You don't have to go to Fireplace. And if you want to resize it, dragging the frame, the container. I'm going to show you. So this illustrates the container part. So the duck picture is the content. The green box is the container that holds the content. So that'll crop it. Or you can right-click, choose Fitting, and you can choose how the frame and content interact. You can fit the frame to the content, meaning the frame resizes to only fit the content, no overlap, no underlap. You can fit the content to the frame, which shrinks the picture so that it all fits. Or you can choose a few other options that kind of a long process to go to all of them, but I'm going to choose Fit Frame Content, and it fixes that. Now you can resize it if on the Mac you hold down Command, Option, and Shift before resizing the frame. On Windows it's Control, Alt, Shift, I think.
Sounds about right.
But see, I have to add options, like instead of like Photoshop, and that would use the shift option.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. It's actually it's the Command Option that does it. The Shift constrains the scale. So if I just held Command Option and then dragged, it would resize and distort, but the Shift keeps the scale in place. Okay, so if you're doing a print layout, that's how you do it. You just bring in the graphic and you place it on the page where you want it, and you're done. And they're separate objects, and in InDesign you can switch into a preview mode if you just tap W. And that gets rid of all the frames and the guides and whatever other ethereal components there are on the page, and just lets you see how it will print. Clear the background color out of that. Okay. Saw a little ghost of green. So if I was going to press with this, I'd probably be fired because of the way it looks. But assuming I was going to press with this, that's it, I'd be done. But when you're going to ebook, it's not enough to just put this in the right place, because if I take this and I go to File, Export, and I make this an EPUB reflowable. Anybody in here not using InDesign CC? Okay. One of these options, the EPUB fixed layout, is not going to be in your versions. It's new to the CC 2014 release. And pretty soon it'll be finished in its future release. It's missing a few key things, but right now it's usable. But I'm going to make reflowable EPUB. We'll just call it, leave all these their defaults, hit OK. It should ask me where to save it. Or did I already save it? Oh yeah, okay. So switch over to that. And then here's the EPUB, and I'll just double click that and it opens up. Now, this is iBooks showing me two-page view. So, notice that floated off to the right of the text in InDesign, But here, it shows up after all the text. If I close that, and I move the duck over here, go back to export, let's replace it. I thought there was a view after. Now the duck appears above the text, which is great until I need a second piece in there. So I'm just going to copy all that, return, paste it, and let me bring in another picture, practice images. That one will work. Let's say this was another one of my projects. Now when I export to EPUB, where did the car go? There's a complex relationship, or rather the relationship between the images and text, their placement and order on the pages. That determines where they wind up in the EPUB. In essence what it is whichever is first and leftmost, topmost and leftmost, winds up in the document first. So the duck being top left, ahead of the text frame, winds up in the EPUB. But then the text frame comes, so the entirety of the text gets put into the EPUB before the next picture does. Okay? So that's why print layouts won't work as ebooks. But a real simple way to fix that is to select the object with the black arrow, Command X to cut. I'm going to double click in the text frame, so I don't know if you can see it, but I've got a blinking cursor up here. So I'm in there ready to type, and I'm going to hit Command V and paste it. And I'll do the same thing with the hot rod picture. Command X.
Basically, you're forcing an issue, and then everyone knows what's going to happen.
Right. So I'm making the pictures be treated as text as well. By pasting them into the flow of text, they're treated as text. So if I go in here and go all the way to the top here, actually go all the way to the top, start typing, it moves the picture over. It's being treated, the pictures are being treated as a single character. Okay, so as far as InDesign is concerned, that's what it is. So I can move it around and it gets flowed into the text.
Question?
Yeah.
Yes.
What would happen if you had two text frames, each one with a picture and a block of text? Would it treat the second picture, like the picture of the car, as part of that text frame, or would it still throw the pictures around?
No, it would still go top left. So duck picture, first text frame,
Yeah.
then whichever is higher and leftmost, the hot rod picture or the second text frame would show up next.
So you can, so it's okay to, if you wanted to, just to, instead of having a continuous flow of your, automatic pages, that you could have a series of different text frames in an order that you want to present, and it still will coordinate showing it to you based on each of those frames in the order that you place them in the document.
Correct. But it does, and a lot of times that's all you need. You can take a print layout and it'll work just fine converted to EPUB because you've arranged the objects in such a way that they're in the correct order.
So it's kind of translatable by thinking out that strategy first.
Yes, but sometimes that strategy becomes unwieldy.
Okay, yeah,
So
because you've got a whole bunch of everything, yeah.
Right. So this is one way around it. There's another way that lends itself to more converting more visual layouts to EPUB. This is if you're building just an EPUB straight.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
If you knew you had a relatively small picture, could you put several on one line, or you won't allow one?
Not as simple as an answer as it should be.
You'd have to put it inside of one image and then show it.
Well, yes and no. If you put, let's say, 3 on a line, if the device is wide enough, and if the ebook software running on that device supports multiple inline images, it'll then work.
Well, some do.
Typically, with the better stuff, Kindle, Nook, and iBooks, typically you'll get the images beside each other. And if it's not, if they can't fit, then we'll wrap them until they're all paid up. And then what happens is the images will scale if necessary too. So if I took fairly big images like this and I tried to view them on my phone, it wouldn't make me scroll sideways. It would scale the images to fit within the phone's viewport.
And still scroll vertically.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would you do if you wanted to have a catalog of your images for sale, for example? What would your recommendation be for something like that?
It would go back to that question. Where is your audience? What I would do, honestly, if I wanted to build a catalog and sell my images and I wanted it available to the widest possible audience, I'd build multiple versions. Kind of like the web. I mean, anybody remember the web in the mid to late 90s? Okay. Anybody designing for the web in the? Okay. So you had to kind of, what was the term we used? Degrade gracefully. You knew that the newest browsers would support whatever you were trying to do, CSS drop caps or whatever you're trying to do. But you knew the older browsers wouldn't, so you had to design to degrade gracefully. You had to look at, okay, here's the best that the technology will allow me to do, and I love it and it's great. Now I have to look at what nonprofits and banks can see.
Right.
Okay, so that's this thing,
Right.
and you try and make that look as good as possible within the limits of the technology. That's what EPUB is. It's the lowest common denominator. We've all got, if you got a recent smartphone, then you have an ebook reader. It's built in. Google forces their Google Play reader onto your Android devices. Anything, I think iOS 7 or higher, iOS 6 and higher maybe, has iBooks built in. You don't have to download it. And then OS Mavericks and higher has iBooks built in. So you've got the best in class e-readers. Because Google Play is a really good, they're basing it off of, it supports almost everything that iBooks does. But then you have to think about, these can also be read on black and white Kindles, e-ink Kindles. But that gives you an opportunity. Your image catalog can be sold there. All the images will be grayscale, but they're viewable. And you just build in things like links to your own website and things like that. Maybe a link, view this image on the web,
Right.
so they can then go and see it.
Sure.
So you kind of have to
You have
plan
to
it
have a
that
whole
way.
strategy.
Yeah, for the maximum exposure.
Right.
And ultimately, it's not that difficult to build multiple versions. You start with the best version, which would be your print-ready or fully interactive version, and then you scale it back for the versions like a flat PDF or an ebook or fixed layout ebook.
I
Question?
have a question about text. As a photographer, I got into Photoshop, and I discovered the text in Photoshop, and I just started designing. I like that word boss and all that kind of stuff. Excuse me. Can you just take those files and just bring them into InDesign, or does the text in InDesign allow me to do those creative things like Photoshop does with text?
Not a whole lot of creative stuff text-wise.
In InDesign?
Yeah, well, what are you talking? What kind of effects are you talking about in Photoshop?
That's $10.
Well, you know, I just use the, you know, like bevel and emboss and patterns and,
On text itself?
yeah, I mean, I just designed in text. I didn't know what I was doing, but I discovered this wonderful creative process. And I love it. I love, you know, instead of going to Illustrator, because I didn't have Illustrator, I just created these graphic designs, if you will, in Photoshop. I resisted InDesign because I didn't think I would have that. Or can you just drag those files like an image?
You can just bring them as an image.
Just bring them in?
Yeah,
Does the
InDesign.
text look that great though, when you start to print it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, as long as the resolution is good in Photoshop, it'll output exactly the same in InDesign.
So to go like 300 dB on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you just want to make sure you don't scale it up in InDesign. You don't increase the size, because as you increase the dimensions of the image, you reduce the quality.
It's worth noting that when you bring it in, unless you have the settings right, it's not going to look high res unless you set the
Thank you.
choose
Yep.
for it to be high res.
And what's your name?
Yeah, Mark.
Mark. I know we met. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. What Mark is pointing out is that ought to work. Okay. When you place an image into InDesign, I'm just going to turn it gray. What you get is a low resolution proxy. Okay, the page and things like that. So, going back to the ebook, the real basic version, I've put these images, I've copied them and pasted them right into the text. So now, if I export, and I'm just hitting Command E to export, choose EPUB reflowable, hit save, replace, okay, double click it, and now the images show up where they should be in the text. So they show up in front of, you know, each one. And then if I resize this, you can see the image scales. This is the smallest it'll let me resize the window. But the image scales to fit on a phone. At no time do EPUBs ever get you to scroll sideways, which is an anathema. People do not scroll sideways. So, you know, that's one really good thing about it. And it just fits everything. You know, it'll wrap the lines. It'll even do hyphenation built in. Notice creation here. So it's pretty good. So you can rely that people are going to see your images in their entirety, no matter what size device they're looking at. And again, if you've got multiple on one line and the device is big enough, it will, you know, it'll display them, multiple on one line. Okay. So that's the real simple way to do this, you know, to do EPUBs. There's a lot you can get into, you know, a lot more detail. You can add, EPUBs are HTML, and they have CSS, cascading style sheets, that control their look. You can crack into them. You can do things like initial drop caps on lines. You can change the color of everything. You can add drop shadows in these things, but I will never tell you how.
Why?
These drop shadows are so overused. And always at the default settings. I mean, in Photoshop and InDesign Illustrator, just the default setting.
The angle and the depth.
Yeah.
And all that, yeah.
Oh. If you do want to use drop shadows, experiment with different colors. You can get some really cool stuff out of a dark brown or a navy or a dark green drop shadow. You know, or if putting something on white, use light blue. Get some nifty effects. Try not to go with the defaults.
Can the photos be at least centered or no?
Yes,
And something a little bit nicer.
Sure.
they can. And I'm glad you asked that question. The photos are treated like characters. So here, I'm dragging with the type tool, so I can select characters
Yeah.
here. And in InDesign, you don't have to see all these invisible pilcrows and stuff. At the bottom of the type menu is show, hide, hidden characters. I have them shown, so this makes more sense. So I'm going to highlight this with the type tool, and it selects it, and then I can just click the center button.
Oh, actually, it is type.
Yeah.
The same exact one.
Exactly. Also, spacing above and below, and indents. You can, all of that supported in the EPUB, which means it's supported in the text here.
Makes sense.
You know, so if I wanted to make sure that this image here always had ample breathing room vertically, I could go,
So your paragraph thing.
yeah, which is too small to fit there, so I can go up here and start adding space above it. Sorry, this popped up. Sorry about that.
So, one of the things, so when Celeste was asking about catalog imagery, it came to mind how sometimes you'll have like, say, 2 or 3 images in a column. And because I'm looking at each page, sort of like a single column. And then often you'll have a caption under each. So, if you were trying to do something like 2 or 3 across, would you be trying to set it with a sort of tabs and then like going down to the next line with captions underneath?
No, that would get totally destroyed. Your tabs would get
Yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah.
So the way you would do that,
So and I'm assuming that some kind of table structure is not the way to go, or is it because
No.
the table, okay.
table supported ebooks
Yeah.
it varies greatly by platform.
Okay.
It's even more up in the
Complex.
air than CSS effects like drop shadows. So one platform will support a table and make you scroll to the side. One platform will warp the table all to hell.
Sure. Yeah.
So
yeah.
you want to avoid tables in that.
Do you end up with more like inserting when they were talking about these text frames in between?
Yes, and I'll get to that in a minute, but there's a precursor thing I have to show to make that make sense.
That's fine, I can wait, I was just curious about, because Celeste.
Well, that's a good question.
got me thinking about it.
Okay, so I'm going to delete this. So I've deleted the pictures. And bear in mind, you don't have to have a whole lot of text here. You can just have a little bit of text and then just go picture text, or whatever you want. I could also just grab, I should grab 4 pictures here. Hopefully none of them is super huge. Okay. So I could just take these, cut, switch to the type tool, paste, return, switch to the black arrow, cut, paste, return, and just do one more. And then export to EPUB, yes, replace it. And then they'll show up in order. So in this case, the width of the page made this so tall that it couldn't fit the next one on it, so it moved to the following page. So they would appear in order. But if I resize this down, I should be able to, well, at least 2 of them stack. You can see 2 of them stack. So you don't have to have text in between. You can just have straight pictures in there, but they're treated like text, and that's you have to conceive of them that way. And you could put captions in between if you wanted. So just type in here.
Because you're still treating it as though it's a single column.
Yes,
So you can stack it that way.
correct.
Okay.
Columns don't do well in EPUB.
No. Okay.
It's part of the specification for the file format, but the device support is really spotty.
Well, I mean, it's understandable because of all the different sizing of the viewing of something. So you simplify it in order to kind of create a common denominator.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's what EPUB is designed to be. It is the common denominator. And it's been around a lot longer than, tablets and all that. It's just when the iPad hit, the market for mobile reading exploded. Even though the Kindles and the Kobos and the Nooks had been out there for a long time, and EPUB as a format, EPUB 1, version 1 and 2, had been out for quite a few years, it took tablets to really make the market explode. And now we're seeing EPUBs, the average new bestseller on the New York Times bestseller sells 1.4 copies of an ebook for every print book. The really popular ones dramatically outdistance the print sales in EPUB.
Yes.
So that tells us that people have these devices, they're using them. Why can't we as designers and photographers take advantage of that?
Have you ever ridden on an airplane recently and everybody's got their little tablets for all their books? There's a few people might still have the physical, but everybody else is like on digital.
Well, I got to tell you, as a fairly big guy, I could never work on a laptop on a plane because I was always like this, So, especially if I had seatmates. But being able to work on my iPad's great. So that's one way you can do this. You can also do it. Let me undo these. By the way, InDesign has unlimited undos.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things I like to do when I teach an InDesign class is start at the beginning of the class building a document, and then 8 hours later, at the end of the day, I start hitting Command Z a few times and I go all the way back to the blank document we've been working on for 8 hours.
You do not.
I do. As long as you don't close the document, you can save it and it'll still undo past the save. But as long as you haven't closed the document, you can undo everything.
And once you close it, you can.
Right. It has saved my bacon a few
I just want to know who
times.
sits there and watches you undo 8 hours worth of.
Oh, it's real fast. You just hold Command Z.
So you could go back to the Renaissance if you wanted to.
That'd be nice.
Oh, God.
Some of us would fit better than myself included.
That's great.
Okay, so another way you can do this is instead of pasting the image into the text, and this is what gets really useful if you've already got a print-centric layout or a layout that's more advanced for a different format, whether it's print or something else. So let's say I've got this picture of the couple, and I'm going to put them over here. I'll put them over here. And crop this down a little bit. And we'll stick this magnifying glass over here. And let's say this is what I wanted to produce. I wanted, a print or a PDF or some other version that looked like this. But I also want the same document to output to EPUB. Now we already know this is not going to work this way, right? The order is going to be wrong. So I can rebuild the document, which with a one-page document and a handful of images, not a big deal. 10, 20, 150 pages, that's a lot of time. Now if it's for a client, sure, you do it that way, you build. If it's for you, save yourself a little time. So InDesign, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm actually going to pull these away from the margins just so that you can see the entirety of the boxes. Around the frames, graphic frames or picture frames, you have a bunch of little symbols, okay? And they're around text frames too, but there are a couple, there are different ones on text frames. So the little white boxes in the corners are the control corners. You drag that and you resize or crop or whatnot, okay? Same thing about the ones that are dead center on each plane. They allow you to resize the frame. And if you hold Command Option, oops, they allow you to resize the frame and picture in one. And then you have one invisible one that's in the middle that's supposed to be the center point, the 9th anchor. Now, outside of those, you also have, that text is kind of in the way. You have some other items here. You've got a little blue box, a little yellow box, and you got this little link up in the top left corner here. Now, the yellow box allows you to round the corners.
So you don't have to open up the other menu part to do that?
Right. Oops. And there's actually keyboard commands to adjust them. So you can do one corner at a time. You can change the corner types, so it doesn't have to be rounded. So that's what the yellow is for. It's the corner options control.
Okay.
Go up here and reset that. And object corner options lets you get out all that stuff numerically. Now the blue one, and this was introduced in CS6, so should probably have it. The blue one lets you anchor an image to a specific place in the text without having to cut the image and paste it into the text. Effectively, it acts the same way without physically moving the image. So if I put my picture back over here, and I click on this blue box and I drag it to some place in the text. You can see that little I-beam there? Wherever that I-beam is, it lets me know that when I let go of the mouse button, that's where I'm going to drop the image's anchor. That means it'll be tethered to that point in the text. And wherever that text goes, that image will follow at that point. So in this case, I want to put it in front of the title. And then I get a little yen symbol if hidden characters are shown. That shows me that's the anchor. I don't know why they chose that particular symbol, but they chose that back in InDesign 2.0, I think, or CS1. And this image is now anchored to it. And then you can see the little blue box has turned to a preview or an icon of an anchor. Okay, so I'll do the same thing with the image here. Drag it, drop it in. Now that's anchored. So now, even though this text frame is top left, meaning it comes in front of these pictures, when I do an export, save replace, okay, switch over.
So your anchor determined where it went.
Right. So the anchor took the place of putting the picture in that spot. And the anchor itself is treated like a character, it's just the same. But it's an invisible character. But I could take it, I could center it, I could give it spacing above and below, I could indent it, you know, whatever I can do with an actual text character, I can do with that anchor character.
You could put it in the middle of the paragraph.
And it would show
wrap
wrap
around the picture?
Well, yes and no. It'll
above and below.
Above and below. One of the things that's in the specification for ebooks, but is not widely adopted in the reader software yet, is the ability to do full text wraps, just like you would in CSS. Basically, EPUB 3 is CSS 3 and HTML 4.1 transitional. So anything you could do with them, you're supposed to be able to do with these, but again, we're waiting for everybody to update their hardware and software. And when you're looking at people buying, you know, the Kindles and the Kindle Paperwhites, they don't, those pieces of hardware never get updated. They don't get flash updates.
So you could technically, I don't know, good thing, but maybe under some circumstances it might be a good thing. All your photos at the bottom or top of the document with anchors, appropriate anchors in place. You could do that.
Yep, absolutely. Or wherever you want to put them. You could make a layout that's as visually rich as you want for print or PDF or whatnot. And then instead of having to rebuild the whole thing just for your EPUB export, just anchor them correctly.
That's what I was
How
meant.
far back, I mean, is there a limitation to, if you've created a document maybe several versions back, will it still work?
Oh yeah, InDesign, every version of InDesign will open documents created with all prior versions.
But when you save it, it's updated to the cloud version, whatever you use.
Yes. But you can also save backwards in InDesign. And unfortunately, it's only one version back at a time. But if you go to...
Create an IDL, if you need to, it can be open or
Well, no, IDMLs are only as far back as CS4. Before that, it was INX. So you have to keep... So people like me keep several versions of InDesign on hand just in case you need to convert files for clients or for somebody. But yeah, so if you go to, File Save As, under the format here, you can choose, a document or template in whatever the current version is. And then it gives you another version. So CS4 and later does IDML, which is an XML-based version of an InDesign file. And then that can be opened in CS4, CS5, CS6, CC, CC 2014, and every version going forward. So right now I'm running the latest version, but if I was collaborating with somebody on CS6 or an earlier CC, both of which I do frequently, I would need to save it out as an IDML to get it back to them. Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah, so you can create, this visually rich document, and then you just drag these little blue blocks here into the right place in the text, and then the things flow properly in the ebook. And that's how you get things like maybe not this one. Okay. Things like this.
Right.
This is the print layout of one of the books that's on the table over there. And the production artist, oh, I see what he did. Actually, he made that one image. Okay. But what he did with the rest of this stuff is he just anchored this stuff into the text in the right place instead of doing it in line. Because that would be insane, because they start the layout while I'm still doing some editing and my image is on the image. So, and that would totally mess up the layout. So you just anchor it. And then if the image needs to be updated with something bigger or smaller or whatnot, then everything adapts to there.
That's lots of, you use it for different reasons, but it works.
I have a question. When you remove that little blue dot and you put it in a place and it anchors it, but yet it leaves it wherever, if you place it on your desktop, or a pasteboard rather, just leaves it there. Isn't that kind of
Deceiving.
it's not very, well, visually, it doesn't help you know what you did. Or is there, if you don't have those little invisible characters, is there a way to know where those anchors are?
You can't preview directly, but you can export to EPUB.
And then check out what happened.
Yep. So, and on Mac with Mavericks, you've got iBooks built in, which is what I've just been using to preview. Also, Adobe Digital Editions, which is Adobe's ebook reader, great for previewing. Now, the version that's available right now doesn't support all the new features, but 2.0 is in the pipeline, or sorry, 3.0 is in the pipeline. It should be released before the end of the year, and that will be a great preview utility. And you just double-click the EPUB or the fixed layout EPUB, and it should open in whatever reader you have set up. In my case, it's iBooks. You can also get Kindle software for the computer. You can do this third-party things like Calibre and some other editors and such.
So the anchor symbol itself, there's no number on it to reference back to the picture, is there?
No, good question. There is not. So if I had something like this, I couldn't see it. I would have no idea which picture is anchoring where. And in this case, fairly simple, but if I've got 10 different pictures on a
Right.
catalog page. However, if you go, if in InDesign you go to View, Extras, Show Text Threads,
Oh.
you get this little
There you go.
invisible line. And it only shows up when you've actually selected an anchored object.
Ah,
So it only shows up for the frame I have
Oh.
selected.
that's beautiful.
That's nice.
And that goes straight to where that anchor is. And again, the anchor is invisible, but it's treated like a character, so I can highlight it. If I can get in there.
What was it under?
In text
View,
using?
view extras,
Extras.
Oh, extras.
show text
Yeah.
threads. Okay, so I just cut that and I'm pasting it here, and then if I click away, you can see the line now goes to that. Now, if I select the text frame itself, it shows me all of the links, because I've got 2 anchors in there, so it shows where all the images are going.
That's cool.
So if you're a painter or any kind of artist or whatever, you can have, just like you've got there, just maybe think in terms of a single image and then maybe a title and a price and then swipe it. And,
Yep.
you know,
And you could also do, you can also make multiple text frames. So I just grab the type tool, and I'm clicking and dragging on the pasteboard here, and I created a rectangle from the text frame. So, oh, sorry. Here's my title.
If you save that, those are all part of the document, right?
Yes.
Oh.
So here I've got this other text frame. Notice it has a little blue block at the top as well. So I can drag that, and maybe we'll put it right after there. When I do an export, oop, okay. Here's my title. It costs $9. And in this way, you can put in elements that only appear in the ebook and not in the print document, or the PDF or whatever. You just put those elements off on the pasteboard and anchor them.
So the pasteboard is part of the document.
well, if it's
It
anchored.
is, but it wouldn't print.
Right,
In this
right,
case, we're anchoring it, so we're including that by reference.
Right, that's cool.
So that's what an EPUB is, and that anchor is a reference to other content, and EPUB grabs all of the content that it sees, so it makes it part of the text file.
And there's no way to do it to an outside doc, another file.
I don't think so. Hold on. That is a really good question. One of the things that you can do in InDesign that is kind of trippy is you can embed one InDesign document inside another. What have I got? Okay. Well, this will be interesting. Everybody cover your eyes, don't look at my client list. I use InDesign for, oh, right in front of me. I use InDesign to build my proposals and estimates. Okay, so it's missing a bunch of fonts, so it's going to be weird. So here is a multi-page InDesign document. I only brought in one page so far, but I could place all of them in. And then let's embed that. And I think it's going to get treated like an image, but we'll find out. Yeah, it's just an image. But it does demonstrate, you can double tap on an image and zoom in.
And what happens to the resolution of that? How does that happen?
That's one of the options I keep blowing by. So if you hit export replace, okay, so here is the export options for InDesign. Down under conversion settings, It lets you choose the resolution. 7296, which is Windows native resolution. 150, 300. So pixels per inch is equivalent to DPI, dots per inch. So 300 is passable print quality. It's not press quality. But it's certainly more than enough than the average computer screen needs. The higher the resolution of the image, the bigger the image file size.
The memory it takes.
Right. And EPUBs are meant to be small. Therefore, a lot of devices don't have a lot of memory. You start throwing an image-heavy EPUB at a Kindle or a Nook or even an iPad that doesn't have a lot of memory associated to iBook or to ebooks, you could cause some crashes. Ebook, there's another limit. Ebooks are zip files. Everybody knows what a zip file is? Okay. Zip file has a native hard-coded limit of 2 gigabytes. It cannot be larger than 2 gigs or the zip file starts to fall apart. And the integrity of it breaks down, which is why RAR and other compression formats came out that can support larger formats, because we started getting into bigger files. Remember, Bill Gates once said that 512K of memory, kilobytes of memory, was more than anybody had ever needed. And the zip files are from that era. So you got to be careful not to build an EPUB that's more than 2 gigs. Rarely is that an issue because EPUBs being XML or HTML, the text that have the file size. So here's where you set the resolution. Now if you build an image that's 150 pixels square and it's viewed on a screen that doesn't change the size at all, then people will see it at 150 pixels square. That's 72 dots per inch. Okay? That size, if it hasn't scaled down because of the screen size, 72. If they double tap or they pinch and zoom depending on the device, they could see a pixelate. I typically recommend that you go to 150 pixels on images because that allows people to zoom in 200% before any quality is lost. Plus, we're dealing with a whole new class of devices with Retina now, so they are double resolution anyway. So that's what I typically recommend. Now, if you're building an art book, if you're building a photo book, you're really, you're trying to sell photos, think about 300. Is the trade-off of a higher image going to create a PDF or an EPUB that's too big? If not, go with that. Because that allows people to zoom in even more, and on a Retina device allows them to zoom in with absolutely no quality degradation. For the average EPUB, something like this, 150 is fine. Or, I'll get back to the library. Oh, I don't think these have pictures in them. But for, an average book, it's cloud. I haven't downloaded them yet. You don't need images that big. 150 is great. But if the focus is on the images, and that's kind of what we're talking about, is portfolio, catalog, selling, think about the higher res. You just have to make sure to change it in here when you do the export, because InDesign actually generates the graphics that are in the EPUB from this. So you can place a Photoshop document or a JPEG or an Illustrator file or whatever into InDesign, and it can be 10,000 DPI, and you can sit there for 4 hours waiting for it to render on the screen. But InDesign will downsample it to whatever you choose in here when it exports, and it'll create either a PNG or a JPEG out of it.
Do you have any recommendations on so you have the size, you have options, JPEG, PNG, any of the other settings in the standard box?
Yes. As far as the format, you've got 3 choices for what's supported in EPUB: JPEG, GIF, and PNG. GIFs are 256 colors maximum. 2 of those must be black and white. So 254 colors maximum. I don't recommend using it. It's a holdover. I mean, it was created for CompuServe back in 91, 92, somewhere in there. Ping was built as a replacement as 24-bit. JPEG is lossy, no transparency, but great compression. Don't leave it on automatic. I don't like the choices InDesign makes. It kind of has this algorithm where if it sees this many colors and they are this, and they're in, you know, large areas or not, then it goes with this setting. And it's better to choose JPEG or Ping. Ping images are larger than JPEG file size wise because they just don't compress as well. But it's a lossless compression, you don't lose quality. JPEG, you trade quality for file size. Try it out. I mean, all it costs you is time to export it, to find out which one you want to go with. And you can do what's called side loading of EPUBs. You can send an EPUB to yourself on any device and open it up in whatever the e-reader installed on there is. I use Dropbox for that. I have Dropbox on every one of my devices. So I just throw a copy, you know, my EPUB in Dropbox, and I go to my iPad, and then
pull it down from your iPad.
Yeah. So you know, I will go into Dropbox, and well, here's a PDF. Okay, so
that's kind of a good way to preview it.
It'll download a PDF, and then, you know, this button at the top here, I can choose where to send it. You know? And then you hit more, and it says, it gives you the option of apps that'll read PDFs or read EPUBs. So in my case, I've got several programs on here that'll read EPUBs because I want to see, you know, what it's going to look like on a Nook and a Kindle and all that. So then you can look at it. Same thing with your phones. Stick it in Dropbox and then download it, and, you know, or whatever service you want, or email it to yourself, and preview it. And if it works great, if it's nice and smooth on your phone with 300, you know, PPI ping images, and it's fast to load, leave it. You know, again, the average EPUB don't go that high on the quality. It's not. It's a waste. And we all pay for bandwidth. That's what we pay for nowadays. The data transfer, the bandwidth. You know, and the cell phone companies are trying to convince us that 2.5 gigs a month per person is an amazing deal. But yeah, so you know, you got to consider that.
What happens if you try to work with a PSD file?
It's just fine. You can place PSDs right in InDesign, and then it'll convert them to JPEG or Ping on export.
Yeah, whatever you have set up here is what it will get converted to in export.
Yep.
And you were talking about the memory of the devices. Let's say you've got a 250-page art book with photographs or art. I mean, that's a lot of space. Does the thing read then? I mean, does the whole thing have to fit into that size, or does it only read a part of it at a time?
It loads the whole thing into memory, and that's a problem. You can chapterize books. I don't know, but, well, you can chapterize them. I've got examples somewhere in here, but and what that does is it basically breaks it into multiple EPUB files that are connected by one index. Which you would probably do in that case, then. Yes.
Huge like that.
Yes. And as far as the user experience, they won't know that it's multiple chapters. So in this case, this is a long book. This is what? Okay, in the EPUB version as displayed, 963 pages. So each chapter is actually a separate EPUB. But as far as the user experience, they have no idea that it's like that. It's all wrapped up in one file. There was just a slight pause as it closed the one EPUB and loaded up this other one.
So is there some way to see what size your EPUB is going to be as you're exporting, or before you export?
No. You have to export it.
You just have to export it and then look at it.
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's easy. You open it, go to Finder, highlight it. I've got 315 kilobytes on this one. And then, like I said, the EPUB is a zip file. There's a bunch of different files inside there. So with this really simple file, not counting the graphics, there's 4 different files in there. With a multi-chapter one, you're looking at multiple files, you know, a whole bunch more. And then not to be self-promotional, but my book explains how to cut them open and wrap them back up again. So it's a little more detailed than we can really go into tonight. You can also, in the export settings, you can also, it generates CSS. Like I said, ebooks are HTML formatted with CSS. Technically it's XML, but so is HTML. So it's a subset of XML. So you can generate the CSS and you can choose page margins. This is important to note because sometimes your EPUB doesn't, sometimes it goes edge to edge of screen. And that's difficult for reading. Depends on the device and the software. iBooks automatically puts in, depending on whether you're looking at it Retina or normal, iBooks puts in a 60 pixel or 20 or 30 pixel margin.
So what's best practice?
I usually put in there at least 15, 20 pixels. iBooks and Kobo will ignore that if it's smaller than what their defaults are. So if theirs are 30 and I put 20, it'll make it 30. But on some older Kindles, they go, if you don't put any in there, it goes edge to edge. So you want to make sure there's some padding.
And so just kind of like you were talking about graceful degradation back in the day, I mean, do you sort of just make a decision as you continue to evolve your publications to not go back too many versions? I mean,
with the web design, yeah, but and with PDFs, yes, but we're not really at that point. Well, more importantly, there's not a whole lot of degradation possible on these, so it's not really a pain to include everything. That's what I'm saying. You don't worry about EPUB version 1, but EPUB 2, which gives you all the text, which gives you images but won't center them, that kind of limitation. Just, you deal with it. It's more of a things fall away as opposed to I have to take these extra steps to make it work for them.
I'm just noticing this is saying adding in CSS. And I also noticed that on your document, like it says title of the piece and then the client underneath. How did you format that? And where it says title of the piece is in the background saying like H2 or something like that? Just like regular CSS or some?
Pretty much. I just do the styles in InDesign, and then during the conversion, it figures those out.
Nice. Very nice.
It actually doesn't use H tags unless I've mapped them in the document's XML. Instead, it'll just use divs and spans on everything. But I could go into the document's XML and say, this title paragraph style is H1. And then when it does the export, it'll use the H1 tags.
How do you go into that? You don't have to get into it, just show me where, or tell me where.
Oh, no, that's the split screen. There is... Is it window? It's document structure, view structure. So, is it view, maybe it's view mode.
Like that.
Yes.
Here it is.
Okay. The view structure, Okay, so you show structure, and then off on the right here, or left, sorry, is the structure, which I have none for XML, so it just says root. But I could either build the XML structure into the document, or I could import a DTD and then map styles to it. And then as you're editing styles, paragraph styles. So here I've got my title style that I made. You can also go into export tagging here. You can assign a class, or if I had XML structure, something other than automatic would appear on the tag list here. It would list all the tags I've defined. So I could choose H1 as this, and then the next paragraph style is H2 and so on. Or I could specify, classes, title. And then
I don't want you to get too in the weeds.
I know.
Just show me. That's good. I get it.
Yeah.
I just don't want to get everybody
Yeah.
eyes blazing.
I think people are gonna.
Yeah.
Is it,
So
is it preserving your typefaces like a PDF would?
for the most part, yes. It depends on the device. So if the device has that font on it, it will work. It'll show it in that font. Otherwise, it will start with font substitution like a web page.
So it's not like a PDF, it's performing more like a web page.
Right. But you can embed fonts if the platforms, you can embed fonts in the creation of it, but the platforms, not all of them support it. But it's like CSS, it is the CSS at font face embedding.
Right.
So in this case, I just used fonts that I knew would be on everybody's InDesign, which is Myriad and Minion. And then what will happen is, depending on the device, that'll map to Helvetica or Trebuchet or something. Unless I embed the fonts, which adds the whole font file to this and makes the EPUBs even bigger. But you can embed fonts. You have to crack open EPUB and edit the code a little bit, which is nowhere near as scary as it sounds, because it's mostly plain English stuff. Again, I talk about that in the e-publishing with InDesign book. But you can also find other ways. If you just look online, embed fonts in EPUB, you can find instructions.
It's not a licensing problem?
Pardon?
It's not a licensing problem?
As long as the font can be embedded, if it's allowed to be embedded in web, then it's allowed to be embedded in EPUB.
So some of the Google fonts and Squirrel fonts?
Well, yeah, but also a lot of commercial stuff. Almost all of Adobe's Typekit fonts, they can be embedded.
That's a pretty neat application that I've looked at.
Typekit?
Yeah, wow.
I love it. It's great. If I opened a document that I worked on my desktop computer and used a Typekit font on this, it would instantly download the font and install it, and my document would look fine. I wouldn't have font substitution. Or I could send it to you, and if it's a Typekit font and we both have current subscriptions, it'll download it and install it. There you go. So, yeah.
When you embed a font, how much space does that take up?
Almost the same size as the font file itself. So if the font's 5 megs, it'll take up almost 5 megs in the EPUB. It's only slightly compressed.
All right, so when you're not embedding a font, you're using one that the iBook uses or whatever, I guess it's just a code that says use this font?
Yeah, it just, basically it's what we call a font set. So if I use Bauhaus, okay, that's a sans serif font. So it'll say use Bauhaus. If Bauhaus is not available, what's the next substitute? In HTML, and if I cracked open the code, I can tell it which one's to substitute. But in general, it'll say, you know, try Helvetica. Is Helvetica installed? No. Try whatever, try whatever, try whatever, until it gets to the base, which is, okay, if there's nothing else around, grab whatever the sans serif default font is and use that. And then same thing with serif typefaces. You know, Garamond, Times, New Roman, blah, 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 serif.
Okay. No, I don't want to belabor this. Maybe we can talk later over here. I'm curious if the fonts are embedded in the devices?
Typically, unless you embed a separate font in the EPUB, then yes, they're on the devices.
Okay.
And there are tables that you can get to somewhere. Fonts on e-readers. It's a forum. Okay, but they're out there.
Okay.
Again,
Okay.
it's also in my book. Books. I wrote a couple of them on this subject. But the e-publishing. So yeah, so there's that. Okay, so that's a basic EPUB. All right, reflowable. Lowest common denominator, but not bad quality. It just means it's universally accepted. It's like HTML. Every device can read HTML. Can't read all the whiz-bang HTML5 stuff necessarily, but it can all read HTML and show text and pictures. So you can build that, and I recommend, you know, considering building that. Then you can build something that's a little more advanced. So let's say and the photographers in here should recognize this. These blue boxes are empty frames. Okay? So these are common layouts for pictures. So I'm going to go up to File, Place. I lost. Okay. Just grab a bunch of pictures. One of the nice things about InDesign, you can place multiple pictures in one shot. Just select them. And, oh, he's vertical. None of these is. All right. Well, I'll drop them there. I don't know what that is. Bad image, apparently. Do that. Put him there. Mugs. I want to feature you. Oh, that's a nice one. Yep. Drop you there. And put you there. And we're good. So now my page is laid out, for the most part. You know, obviously I've got some issues here, and I'm going to get rid of this bad picture. So, with that text frame, or sorry, this graphic frame selected, doesn't have text and has an error code. I'm going to go back to File, Place, and if I choose a new picture, it'll automatically replace that, and it will fit to that frame. This guy squints a little bit, so it's a good example when I show liquifying Photoshop or how to open up his eyes a little more. So I can also right-click on these or go to the Object menu and choose Fitting. And we'll choose Fill Frame. Oh, it's already filled. So Fit Content proportionally, Fit Content proportionally. And the rest can stay for now. Something like this. If I went and exported this as an EPUB, reflowable, say OK. And where did that wind up? So there was the text frame I had earlier on in the document, so that's where that came from. So blank pages. And that's how the images appear.
They don't look very nice.
Well, some of them are cut off because that's how they were in the print page. Like that was cut off, and that.
Well, when you resize it, it was fine.
Yeah, before you, like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because they were in separate text frames, so they're right up against each other, or they're in separate graphic frames, and they weren't part of the text flow, so there's no spacing or anything on them. But this could be the lowest common denominator. You've got a visually rich layout like this, and you export that straight to EPUB without touching anything. And it's passable. You know, it's got, at least the images all show up. What I might do in this case is I might put a text frame off on the side here.
Oh, so you're going to anchor them in between?
Yep. And then as long the text frame has to appear on the page, because that's the location for the anchors. Something that is anchored can be out off the page, but you have to have, you know, it has to be somewhere. So as long as it overlaps, and then I could take them and link them all in there, and then give each one, you know, vertical spacing, so you get some pattern, or center them.
Yeah, you need to be able to do that.
Oh, whoops. Oh, because let me unlink it. There we go. Or I can take this. Let me, trash these pages.
Is this a canned layout template?
It is. I was going to create it myself, and then I put together some links of some free templates that you guys can download, and I found that. I was like, well, why should I rebuild it? Somebody else can do it. So I tweaked a few things, but let's say copy. Okay. iOS, my favorite is PDF Expert. Still not great on the interactive features, but at least it lets me interact with forms. I can comment. I can, do all kinds of markup. I can do all that. But I can't do a whole lot of interactivity stuff. Great on Mac and Windows, and on Windows Mobile because it's Windows singular.
What do you like for Android?
I think PDF Expert as well. It's been a couple of years since I actually used an Android tablet for more than testing, before publishing, or testing app or public DPS apps and such. But yeah, PDF Expert's a pretty good one. If you do a search for best PDF reader and you do PDF Expert, you'll find differing opinions. There's like 3 of them that people go back and forth saying which one's the best. And you can usually find them on sale for $5 or $6, which is nice. Yeah, okay, so as a PDF turns out great. As an EPUB, as a reflowable EPUB, not so good. But fortunately, InDesign CC 2014 gives us an intermediary option. So I'm going to go to File, Export, EPUB Fixed Layout.
Yeah, that's what I'm using.
Oh yeah, no, it's still going to make it a .EPUB as well, but it's a flavored EPUB is what it is. So I'll just leave this all as default. Hit OK. And this is why I like demoing it best on Mac, because iBooks does a beautiful job of rendering. This is an EPUB.
That's nice.
This looks the same on my iPad, and it reworks. This is 2 pages. This is a spread. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's not, because it's really wide pages, right? Yeah. So this is not, but it would show it in a spread if they were narrower pages. I can't scale. But it looks pretty close to the same on an iPhone.
And it's got space in between the images and that's good. So,
precisely the way they were laid out on the InDesign page.
Nice.
They translate. See?
Mm-hmm.
And notice the text on the first page.
So
And it's live selectable text. And these are individual selectable images. So,
can people right-click and copy the images?
well, no, not the images, but they can copy the text.
I'll be home tomorrow, so I'll take care.
So if you're working on a magazine, this might be a little more the form of it, and you would still maybe have links that are active and that kind of thing, because you would add them in?
Yes, but there you have identified one of the problems right now.
Okay.
Adobe released the fixed layout features of InDesign CC before it was finished. It can't do links.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Well, it can do a handful of links, but you get more than a handful, and it depends on the overall length. And it just breaks. The links die. They become regular text. Adobe is aware of it. They are working on it. So now I've got, this is 2 separate pages.
Like a centerfold kind of thing.
And I've actually got to move this off, because that'll get weird when it does the export. Got to have your objects fully on one page. If you can do a background image that runs the spread, but what happens if the spread doesn't get shown together, if the pages get split up, it gets weird.
That could be odd, because it's like chopped up then, but kind of like,
Right, yeah, so basically you have to have 2 copies of the background image, one for the left, one for the right page. So, and that's the way it'll work.
Oh, this is like facing pages, is what you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now I've got facing pages here. So here it is as a spread. So if I take this and close it, save, place, okay, click. Okay, so now I've got more standard page, it's a more standard page layout. And that's very weird. Why is it doing that? It should show them
All in one spread,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that might be a weird There might be a bug or something going on with the way iBooks is shown for some reason. But typically it'll show them like I designed them as a spread. But on smaller devices like iPhones, iBooks has the option in the code, or I'm not sure if it's actually in the export options yet, but you can set it, allow pages to shuffle basically when it exports. So if the device is too small, it can show one page at a time, or it can show the spread and allow them to scroll across if you don't allow the pages to shuffle. So people aren't limited to it shrinking down to an illegible size. They can fit one page or zoom in a bit. So fixed layout gives you kind of the best of all worlds. You get the ability to lay out the page exactly the way you want it, and you can, and you get the EPUB ability. And as soon as Adobe finishes it, you'll be able to do links.
So do you think people will be doing like EMS catalogs and skier catalogs and things that we usually get in the mail, right? I mean, is that what's going to be on?
IKEA made news for doing it.
So they've got their catalog
A fixed layout.
A fixed layout of.
People are moving away from the apps, from publishing to app, and publishing to fixed layout.
They are.
They are. Because fixed layout is not new. It's been around for 3 years. Hopefully this downloads quickly. It's been around for 3 or 4 years. 3 years it's been available on iPads. So, but up until this point, it was children's books and the occasional art book. So common, in fact, that Barnes & Noble, the Nook store, still only classifies fixed layouts as children's books or comic books. So graphic novels, comic books, fixed layout works perfectly for them because they've got the panel set up. But the format opens up a world of possibilities for anybody who wants to design a page and have some control over it like a PDF, but you want it on mobile devices and you want the ability like EPUB. This is live text, like I said. You can copy and paste. And if I was looking at this on a device and I tapped and held or triple tapped or whatever the device allows, I could define a word. I could make notes, I could highlight, I could copy these annotations to my Kindle account, which you can access on the web and from any other device. You can also build read-along into this, which is a royal pain right now, how to create read-along. You have to tag every word in the audio and tag every word in the code. And you have to build...
2,000 words later.
Yeah, and you have to build a cue sheet that says from this point in the audio to that point, speak this word. And it highlights that word, or rather, tell it to highlight the word. It highlights the word while the speaker is speaking the word, and then it moves on to the next. There's no magic in it. You've told it at 2.95 seconds that start this word. At 2.97 seconds stop this word.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
So,
it'll get easier, but it's really cool when it works.
So if I wanted to create a portfolio that would be viewable on iPads, I wouldn't be publishing it as an app?
You could, and that's where the Adobe DPS stuff comes in. But I would say make it a fixed layout. It's smaller, it's lighter. The DPS apps are, you're looking at a couple of hundred megabytes. Just for the code to render everything before you start adding the size of the images.
And you said you put aside, or you put some links together for templates?
For photo book templates, yes.
Okay.
And I will get you guys the links, but
if your aspect ratio of your template is different than the aspect ratio of one of the readers, does it stretch it to fit the screen, or does it just band it?
It bends it. It'll give you letterbox or
All right, that's preferable.
the other way. Okay, so I put together some links, and I will get all these to Celeste, and Celeste can disseminate.
Yeah.
Some websites with some free photo book or portfolio layout templates for InDesign. And this is the one I'm using. Here we go. So you just download the template. It's in CS4 format, which means it'll open anything later.
It's ironic to see a picture of the printed book.
Well, and you know, any of you photographers use Blurb?
Yeah,
Sometimes.
yeah,
Okay, well, you can do print-on-demand, you know, photo books in Blurb.
yeah.
In fact, one of the things I collected here was, I don't know what it went, one of them is Blurb. They have a plugin for InDesign that lets you format
Right, in
books.
Lightroom, yeah,
Well, yeah, they have the Lightroom one, but they also have an InDesign plugin that'll do it. I think they have
Yeah.
Photoshop as well.
yeah.
And this one doesn't have previews, but there's a download link somewhere on the page. And then with Blurb, you order the books printed, hardcover, whatever. You know, but now as a photographer, you can also offer the option of building fixed layout EPUBs or apps for people. Straight from InDesign. And to build an app, I'll show you the real basics. And like I said, there's a lot more to the options to all of these. I just kind of want to show you what's possible and how quickly you can do it. I didn't mess with any of the options on the exports. You know, and I got usable stuff.
Yeah.
You know, as you dig into the options, you can do things like create a cover, where you either create a separate image as a cover, or you choose which page of the document becomes the cover. And then that shows up in the ebook readers, you know, as the preview. So, you know, these are book covers, these show just the pages. You know, so there's a lot of options in there, but I haven't done anything hard. I just threw pictures in boxes and hit export. Anybody not feel that he or she could do that?
Still learning.
Sorry?
Still learning.
But you can also do interactivity in these and still downloading them. If you get a chance, one of my favorites is from the iBook store, Yellow Submarine. It's the story of the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, with the ebook, fixed layout ebook, animation, music, interactivity built in. You tap on each member of the band and he plays his instrument. You've got the yellow, as you're reading a page, the Yellow Submarine is going, you know, across the spread, following a line of text. There's read-along built in. You tap it and it reads the book to you, which is one of the reasons that fixed layouts became so popular for children's books initially. One of my clients is a Native American cultural history museum, and I've got them building fixed layout EPUBs along with a number of other digital projects to help with built-in audio that reads the pronunciation keys for their native language to people.
Yeah, so you can hear it, actually hear it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and kids can see a picture of a walrus along with whatever the walrus is, I forget what it is in Inupiaq, you know, and how it's spelled in Inupiaq and how it sounds, you know. And then they can tap it and hear the sound of a walrus underwater as recorded by the National Oceanographic Association. You know, all sorts of stuff like that. And that's a fixed layout EPUB that works on anybody's iPad, any recent phone, you know.